Well, I'm going to let Randy share his own bio and some of the things, but we're grateful for you. Thank you for all the time that you've come and really have helped us to establish and set up Christians United for Israel in this region. And I think we have a pretty good, strong, group of pastors and leaders. As a matter of fact, I just want to say thank you to the pastors that are with us here today. Give them a great big hand in the room. God bless them. And so let's go ahead, without further ado, just give Randy Neal a great big welcome as he comes and shares and educates us. Praise God. Thank you.
Oh, you do? Thank you, Pastor Dave. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. So we mixed it up a little bit from last night. We had a great group over at Spirit-Filled Church in Sparks. And just for the benefit of those that are, my presentation's upside down. There we go. Just for the benefit of those, it looked like some folks were going to come to this as well. And it's hard to kind of cover what's going on in 35 or 45 minutes. And so we'll be able to delve into some things that we weren't able to last night. But I'm the senior staffer for Christians United for Israel. I was hired by Pastor Hagee just a couple months after the ministry was launched in 2006. And in spite of me, we've been able to grow. And we started with 412 leaders in February of 2006, and we're right on the threshold of breaking about 11 million members. So right now, we can officially say that we have 10 million members, but we're not terribly far away from 11 million members. And so we're grateful for that, and the Lord has found it good in His sight to use us to do things. We're going to scratch the surface on some things, and we're going to drill kind of deep on some other things. I want to give you a little bit of backdrop, and I'm going to talk kind of fast because I want to plow through a lot of stuff. I try to include every question that I can think of that somebody might have. I try to answer it in my presentation content, and tonight I'm not going to necessarily do that. Tonight I'm going to just kind of do a cursory on most of it, and if somebody doesn't ask it, then I'll try to weave it in otherwise. But I think you know what your questions are, and we're going to look at questions that I suspect most of us entered in with. But curiously, last night I was sharing. I had been scheduled to go to Pastor Canary's church months ago, and it was one of the few times that I fell ill and had to cancel an event months ago. And so he had materials that we're out of now. I mean, we've been doing so many events because of what's going on, and such a high request to go out and try to help people connect the dots and fill in the blanks on what's going on and get a grasp. And how do I discern and sift through all of the different contradictory narratives that that are on the media, and how do I find a reliable news source? And so he already had materials, and Pastor Joey had some here as well. So if you don't have one of these already, raise your hand, and somebody will get one to you. We're gonna reference one of these in a little while. But Pastor Joe, if you want to advance it to that next slide, that would be great. But this is the event that I was scheduled to do had I been, not ill that night. And this is an event this is basically the message that I did here several months ago. I came here, and I love that message. And our standard message that can be adapted and stretched in any different direction is really the attributes of Israel seen through the lenses of a Christian that understands Israel biblically. And it's looking at, the first thing that we look at when we see Israel is we know that it's biblical, and we know that it's truth, and we know that it's, there's height that's emitted from it, there's light, its family as we're grafted in Romans 11, it's eternal as we see in Jeremiah 31, and it's also resilient, and which we'll take a look at. But I zeroed in, the last time I was here, and we camped out on hope because of the message from Abraham, Genesis 21 and Genesis 26 with Isaac, to the Abraham Accords, which was, when I was here last time, it was just really getting out of the gate with Saudi Arabia looking at seriously changing the whole complexion and landscape of the Middle East by sitting down at the table and actually grasping the end of the olive branch that was being extended to them joining other Arab nations, other Muslim nations with the Abraham Accords, where we see nations that used to write 7-figure checks or 8-figure checks for the purpose of annihilation of Israel. And now they're just doing a pro-con column. What's the downside of normalizing relations with my Hebrew neighbor? And we see that in Genesis 26 with the king of Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, and he catches up with Isaac and he goes, clearly I can see that your God has blessed you. He's hitting water in wells that should be dry in the desert during a famine. Good thing. And today, 4,000 years later, the same area, desert, famine. Now that area, the Valley of Gerar, has the blessing of Israel on it. But all the Arab countries around Israel, they are living in a desert, and they've got a famine. And they look at Israel exporting her agriculture with water scarcity. She knows how to literally make it out of thin air. And so they're just finally coming to their senses and realizing what is so bad if we normalize relations with our Hebrew neighbor. It enhances our economy. It enhances the quality of life for our citizens. There's no downside to it. And Saudi Arabia, it appeared, was about to grasp that olive branch, and we know what happened. So this next slide, there are folks that came in. I think tonight we're amongst folks that are mainly like-minded. I don't know if there's anyone. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands who came tonight because you were reluctantly drugged against your will. So some Sunday mornings you might have some of those folks that came just because somebody really wanted them to come. And some Sunday mornings you might have folks that just are at the end of their rope. And they can't get a dial tone when they pray. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. They see some hope reflected in folks that they know have faith in Jesus, and they think that this is a last-ditch effort that they come to a church to see, maybe there's something here for them, and they walk in and there's a message about Israel. And they're like, what did I just get myself in for? I didn't sign up for a geopolitical thing. But the first thing that we need to know is, why should I care? I'm in Reno, or I'm in the greater Reno area, and Israel's all the way half a world away. What does it have to do with me? Why should I even care? You should care because God cares. You should care because it's biblical. From the first book to the last book of the Bible, you can see God's love and plan and purpose and affinity for Israel, using them to make a spectacle out of them when he needs to reveal and glorify himself and get the world's attention. Another question is, most people that came in, most of the people that came in tonight into this audience at this church, or that gravitated towards this kind of message, you weren't asking, why should I care? You were asking, what more can I do? And we'll give you some tangible things. But in the meantime, in between those, you've got these just other questions. I think I know what happened, but did I miss something? What happened? Why did it happen? I think I know why it happened, but is there another puzzle piece to why it happened that maybe I'm missing? And what's going to happen? Is Israel, is there going to be scorched earth in Gaza? What is going to happen? What's the IDF going to do? What's the USA going to do? What is Hamas and Iran going to do? We can answer those questions partially because we don't know the answers. We don't know that answer. The IDF isn't going to make public its plans, nor are its enemies. But the first question, what happened? Yeah, Israel was attacked again. Jews were attacked again. It's a long, long chain. And every link is an attack, and this is just the latest one. This is one of the most horrific ones ever. Some of the things that were carried out in this attack, this barbaric pogrom, it wasn't a war. It was a massacre. And it was done under the, very likely like a pogrom in World War I, where it was so horrific and so barbaric that if you survived and witnessed what happened to others, you would have so much terror struck in your heart, you would be planning how to get out. You wouldn't be, that's just a natural human response. That's what a pogrom does. It is a systematic means of removing an ethnic group from a geographical region. And some of the things that happened during World War I in those pogroms were as horrific as what happened in the attacks on October 7th. Those even more gruesome than most of the things that happened during the Holocaust, because they were done for the sport. They were done to drag out the pain of death in a torturous way just for the sake of it, because they were entirely intoxicated with hate. And this is a church, and we're not going to get into the horrible details and the graphic descriptions, but they're pretty easy to find if you need to have them elaborated in your mind. And I would encourage you to get a grasp of it, just so that you can realize exactly not what Israel suffered, but the moral clarity that she is conducting herself with, when most everyone else in the world would just be blind with rage. She is doing what she has to do, not because of what happened to her, but to make sure it doesn't happen to her kids in the future. So, why did it happen? And, because Israel, because they're Jews, and they're going to be attacked again. What's going to happen next? What is going to happen? It's already happening. The media is demonizing Israel. And we'll look at that more. We'll take a look at the basic components of the way a media draws you in to follow a story, so that you'll stay tuned, so you'll buy tomorrow's paper as soon as it hits the stand while the ink is still wet. They find a way to keep their story as a continuing saga. And those continuing sagas, they usually, one of the rule of thumbs is if it bleeds, it leads. And those stories require 3 components to keep you engaged: a victim, a perpetrator or a villain, and a hero or an intervener. And the media had its work cut out for it, because it was trying to figure out how to simultaneously cast Israel as the victim and the villain. And the people talking at the UN managed to do that. Yeah, those things were terrible, but this didn't happen in a vacuum. Pretty much saying that Israel almost brought it on herself. The absurdity and the hypocrisy with the justification is just unimaginable. But it does require moral clarity. You're going to hear sound bites. You're going to hear things like cycle of violence. Cycle of violence infers a moral equivalency, and there is no moral equivalency in this. There's absolutely no moral equivalency. You're at opposite ends of the polar spectrum when it comes to moral clarity or an entire moral bankruptcy. But let's just take a look. Why should we care? Because it's biblical. That's where we start. As Christians, as believers, we know it's biblical. We're going to just do a very, scratch the surface. You can't come to any message about Israel without somebody dropping Genesis 12:3. We could probably recite it out loud without anybody opening up their Bible. I'll bless those that bless thee, and I'll curse thee that curse thee, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Another passage, if you don't already pray for the peace of Jerusalem, then we ask you to start Psalm 122. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they prosper that love thee. That is, to me, when I look at that, as I shared last night, to me that evokes what we see in Nehemiah, where Jerusalem was destroyed. And Nehemiah scholars argue, he probably had never been to Jerusalem before. But the messengers come into town. He gets the report. He asks what's going on with Jerusalem. He finds out that the city's been destroyed and the people have been scattered. And he goes into mourning as though he just found out that, one of his parents or one of his siblings had been killed. And as the cupbearer to the king, and some folk, I'm surprised how few people realize what that means is that he's the food taster. It's his job to die if somebody tries to poison the king. He's kind of expendable. He's got a good gig. He gets, he's an accessory in the palace, so he's got to dress nice. And he eats great because he's going to eat everything that the king's going to eat. But his job is to die a few hours before the king's going to eat it. And so it's knowing how expendable he is, very much like Esther. When Esther went into the king and she knew that she was risking her life to go in without being invited. But Nehemiah, he's really assertive. And the king notices that he's not he doesn't look well, and he asks how you doing, and he's praying between breaths, and the king is, the Lord touches his heart and gives him favor. And what do you know? Nehemiah gets exactly what he was hoping and praying for. He gets the authority of the king to go to the holy city and rebuild the walls and the gates and regather the people. And what I want us to start with is what I want us to end with tonight. Is that I want us to commit that we're all going to pray like Nehemiah, like we never have before. If we are already doing Psalm 122, then let's dial it up. But then let's also collectively get up from our knees and tangibly do what we can do. Some of us can do hardly anything for whether health or finances or just schedule. And some of us can do a great deal, or even help others to do a great deal. I don't know where you fall on that that whole range, but we're going to have some action items that you can do and that you can kind of peruse through. Exodus 1. We're really looking at it begins with the oldest hatred, and this is kind of the end of that thread. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, "Look, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply." It goes from Pharaoh to Haman to Hitler and Hamas and Hezbollah. It is the oldest hatred in every generation, and we'll look at that in a second. But when we take a look at Hitler, and we're going to take a look at Hitler, and we take a look at Hamas and Hezbollah, that's the same spirit. It is the same exact spirit. It's the same ideology. It's the same worldview. They love the same things, and they hate the same things. The only difference between Hitler and Hamas and Hezbollah is that Hamas and Hezbollah are sock puppets, and Iran has their hand in them, manipulating them. Hamas is basically cannon fodder in what we're seeing right now. Iran is studying everything that they're doing for Act 2. Take a look at Psalm 83. And if I told you that if we were doing an excerpt from the former president of Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, he's the one that got the world's attention when he said Israel should be blotted away from Israel should be removed from the map or blotted from the pages of time. Come, they say, let us destroy them as a nation so that Israel's name is remembered no more. That is, it's not only in Psalm 83, it's essentially what the charter of Hamas was in the 80s when they scripted it. The very first line, Israel will exist until Islam obliterates it. What part of that don't you understand? That's really clear. That's very honest of them to set it up front and center like that. This is a prayer that every Passover, has anybody here ever been to a Passover dinner before? Okay, the first time I went to a Passover dinner, I went with great reverence. I went very somber, very stiff-necked. I was expecting a real intense, religious, reverent experience. And it was like a kids' party. And we opened up, we got a bag of rubber and plastic frogs, and we're throwing them at each other. And then it dawned on me, and I almost was moved to tears when I had the epiphany that was all about engaging the kids so deeply that they look forward to it all year long, so that they will hang on every word, so that they'll learn the story, so they'll know the story, so they can teach the story. It's about handing that baton, that oral tradition. And so part of the Passover is this prayer. Virtually, even in homes that would say that they're not religious, they're still observant to these traditions that are an integral part of their Jewish identity. So they may claim that they're agnostic or not religious, but more often than not, they're having a Passover dinner and passing it onto their kids. And this is the prayer that they will say around the world. And it is this covenant that has stood for our forefathers and us. For not just one enemy has stood against us to wipe us out, but in every generation there have been those who have stood against us to wipe us out, and the Holy One, blessed be He, saves us from their hands. And then they will send, and I was moved, and then they'll just kind of, give a wink and a nod, and they'll say, they tried to kill us, they failed, let's eat. And that's the resilience. That's the, yes, they tried to kill us, but let's move forward. Let's keep our eye on life. Life is for the living. We could learn a lot from our Jewish brothers and sisters and neighbors. But what I want to ask you tonight, or what I want you to challenge you is, as I did the audience last night, because Christians, as Christian families, and this is especially for those of you that have kids or will have kids, we never have to face the dilemma that a Jewish family does, knowing that that prayer is coming on that night. How old is old enough to tell your son or daughter that because their last name is Oberg, or Brooks, or Fair, or Bach, that there's going to be somebody that's going to rise up and want to kill them? How old is old enough for you to convey that to them to where they grasp the reality of it, and then they don't wet the bed that night? Or have a present traumatic syndrome that you've got to deal with for a while until they finally grasp it. And that is a dilemma that every Jewish family has to contend with. And I hope that that will make you a little quicker to have empathy and, for our Jewish friends. Just that's the world that they live in, and that's not a world that we fully appreciate. So we look at this image of the cemetery, and on October 7th, I had an Israel Is message planned in Laramie, Wyoming, and on my way there, I was driving from Cheyenne, and as on my drive there, I was listening to the news of what had happened overnight and getting updated, and my Israel Is message just morphed on the fly. We're just trying to do the facts and fill in the blanks. And before we know it, you've got 1,400 dead Israelis. 80% of them are civilians, intentionally targeted to maximize terror in the most barbaric, horrific means that are imaginable. Beheading toddlers. Rape is not a form of resistance. And I'm not going to elaborate and go on, but there are things that make what I just cited seem superficial compared to some of the things that were done to others. Take a look at this image of just looking to see if the family member that's missing has been confirmed as being taken as a hostage. 240 hostages, and they hope that they're being held in the tunnels and out of harm's way, but they don't really know. And you're going to hear a lot of talk. You're going to hear people using all their political capital and all of their leverage and whatever incentives that they have to do bargaining to try to force either a pause or a ceasefire from Israel. And I'll just ask you to just do a little skip down memory lane. Every time, Hamas does this on purpose. Hamas knows that when they start firing rockets and they start flexing their muscles and they get the world's attention, that pretty soon the world's going to get involved, the UN's going to get involved, the Security Council is going to get involved, the Human Rights Council is going to get involved, and they're going to force the U.S. to start pressuring Israel. They're going to get Qatar or they're going to get Egypt to try to broker a ceasefire, and that's jackpot for Hamas, because a ceasefire means compliance compensation. Somebody's going to write them a check for hundreds of millions of dollars to get them to stop doing what they're doing. And to me, the people that find themselves in the absolute highest rung in world international diplomacy apparently has never raised a 2-year-old. You don't make threats you're not going to carry out. You don't reward bad behavior. How hard is it to realize that? But they keep doing the same thing and they keep getting the same results. It's probably just my wild imagination. It's probably just a mere coincidence that after releasing $6 billion for 6 hostages, that hostages became a high commodity. Probably just a coincidence. One of the folks that spoke on this lectern was Irving Roth, and he was a Holocaust survivor. He did a documentary. We underwrote a documentary that he did called Never Again. If you haven't screened it here, I encourage you to do that. And I traveled the country with him for 10 years, going to churches and synagogues and campuses. And he would always, when it came to the reality, sobering part of the world looking away, he would always start by saying that it began with words. It didn't begin with killing. It began with words. Yeah. And the words that we've been listening to for a long time, and even right here in Reno, there are student groups that are really proud of their keffiyeh collection. Some of them have a Palestinian flag for special events that they'll bring out to show sympathy for their patriots over in Gaza. And they want you to participate in the BDS movement. Boycott, divest, sanctions. They want you to boycott any Israeli products. They want you to boycott any stores that sell Israeli products. They want you to go through your retirement portfolio and take out any investments in companies that do business with Israel. Caterpillar, Motorola, General Electric. You can go on and on and on. And they want you to contact your elected officials and pressure them to bring war crime sanctions to Israel, because they defend themselves when people shoot rockets at them. So boycott is it's not a sexy narrative, but it does have the deception of being politically correct and nonviolent, because it's borrowing from South Africa's apartheid efforts. And that's where they get the springboard to make the allegation that Israel is an apartheid nation. And you know who makes the best case that Israel is not an apartheid nation? Black South Africans that lived through apartheid. Anybody that can define apartheid takes one look at Israel, and they know instantly it is not an apartheid nation at all. It's are there areas that are less than ideal or perfect? What society isn't? All countries are governed by men and women are flawed. But I tell you what, if you want to see the gold standard for moral clarity, and taking the high road to include people, that is not as well off as others, Israel sets the standard. But if you take a look at are we not on the? Did we lose the slides? So this is, how did it start in Germany? Started with boycotting Israeli products. Started with boycotting, or not Israeli products, but Jewish stores. Seems harmless enough, right? Just words. Similar that we're looking at something like that today. Free Palestine, boycott Israel, join the BDS movement. You see these protests with students with their Palestinian flags, and this was a campus protest that we saw about 10 days before what we saw in Capitol Mall last week. And if you go to, I don't know if you have anything at UNR, you probably are fairly removed from some of the hostility, some of the venom that some other areas have, some other campuses have. But if you are able to, if you find yourself with a bunch of folks where you've got a group of Students for Justice in Palestine or the Muslim Student Association, and you walk up and you see that they're proudly wearing their Arafat keffiyehs, and they've got their Palestinian flags, and they've got their signs that say Free Palestine with a Palestinian flag on it, and I want to say Free Palestine and stencil in on the bottom from Hamas. But they, because Hamas doesn't care about the Palestinians living in Gaza. They're cannon fodder to them. Hamas is cannon fodder to Iran. The Palestinians are cannon fodder to Hamas. Human shields. The more that are killed, the more that it plays on CNN to demonize Israel. As tragic and horrible as it is to see an image of a slain child that was caught in the crosshairs, that plays great on CNN for the purposes of Hamas, to get sympathy for their cause and to demonize Israel in the eyes of the international community. And the media just seems to go along as though they don't know how they're being played. But the point is that if you go up, and it happens all the time, you'll see sometimes journalists will actually come up to one of these protests. Sometimes it's one of those roving, on the street guys that's trying to, really probe them. But sometimes it's somebody that's actually trying to be sympathetic to their cause, and they pull them aside and they say, what are you here for? What are you protesting? What's the rally about? And invariably, 9 out of 10 of them will say it's about the occupation. We're resisting the occupation. This is about the occupation. Again, beheading babies is resistance, and rape is resistance. But it's not about the occupation. We've got a number of pastors that have gone to Israel with CUFI in this room. Went to the city of David. You cannot travel the land of Israel and find yourself an acre that you can't stick a shovel in the ground and unearth archaeological evidence that the Jews have been there for thousands of years. So repeat this after me. Israel is odd. ODD. Occupiers don't dig. You don't conquer somebody else's land and then start excavating it, looking for evidence of your ancestors, because if it's somebody else's land, you're not going to find them. But everywhere Israel digs, they find not only evidence of a Jewish presence there, but time after time after time, it is substantiating parts of the Bible that scholars only a couple decades ago was saying that's a book of myths and fables. There are when Israel launched, there were 2 major universities, and they both had charter archaeological departments that were going to be a centerpiece in their academic departments. One of them was going to use archaeology to prove the Bible. One of them was going to use archaeology to disprove the Bible. And 60 years later, they both use the Bible to understand what it is that they're digging up. It takes more faith to be an atheist today. You don't need to go to Israel to have your faith substantiated. But I guarantee you, if you go to Israel, your faith will be substantiated. Whatever embers of your faith, is that you, the guy I described? Are you not getting that dial tone when you go to pray? Are you that roaring blaze of faith that you once had is now just a barely glowing handful of embers? Go to Israel, and the Lord will and stir it into a flamethrower. I used to think that the Lord was using the Bible for us to understand Israel. No. Going and understanding Israel makes you have more faith in the Bible. Let's just take a look. This is a passage that I want you to, this is a homework assignment. I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to do it. I did it last night, and I'm going to do it again tonight. And we still have 35 minutes to go. Oh, my word. Thank you, Pastor Joy, for not starting that timer. We're going to start all over again. So just text your sitter, tell her you're going to be running a little bit late. But Isaiah 40, that's the passage that you should just grab a hold of as a prayer and just as a reminder of who's in control here. Comfort, yes, comfort my people, says your God. Speak comfort to Jerusalem and cry out to her that her warfare is ended, that her iniquity is pardoned. For she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. Go on to read Isaiah 41 through 45. Because Isaiah 41 through 45, how many of you realize that our identity, that your affinity for Israel as a Christian, the part that is just like a blinding light can be found in Romans 9, 10, and 11. Where we're grafted in like a wild olive shoot. And the Apostle Paul warns the early church, don't get all haughty and arrogant thinking that you're the root system holding everything up. You are a wild olive shoot that's been grafted in through the mercies of Jesus Christ to become co-heirs in the promises of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I paraphrased a little bit. Give me a grace card. But what are we grafted into? Everybody, replacement theologians say, well, we're grafted into the promises. The Jews got to keep all the curses, but we're grafted in to be heirs of all the blessings. That might be on the back end, but what are we grafted into? What is expected of us? What is the responsibility that comes with being adopted into the family of God? Abraham was yanked out of a society of pagan worshipers, as were the Gentiles into the Christian church. Romans 15:27. For they realized the spiritual blessings that they were receiving from the Jews, and they felt compelled to give of their material blessings. Why would they reach into their wallet? What happened to them? What do you mean their spiritual blessings? They were pagans. They were idol worshipers. They used to do exactly what God is absurdly, snarkily telling them to do in Isaiah 41 through 45, where he says, go get your idol, go get your hunk of wood or stone or metal, and ask it to tell you when it ever predicted and foretold what was going to happen, and where can it point to it that it happened exactly like it said it was going to happen. Because that's what I'm going to do. I have chosen Jacob, my servant Israel, to be my witness that I alone am God. That's those 4 chapters distilled down to that. And in between is this snarky lesson through absurdity. If you want to know how I'm God, go ahead and put your faith in a graven image of stone and see what happens for you. Because that's what the people in Romans 15 had been doing. And all of a sudden, they had a real relationship. All of a sudden, they had something that they had never got from that idol ever before. And they were compelled. It was real. It was absolutely authentic. I'm sorry. You can't. We can get into geopolitics, but Mom says don't talk about politics and religion. You're going to be talking about both all the time when you're talking about Israel. We can try to get into the geopolitics, but a lot of this is driven by the Bible, and the plans and purposes of God. Why did this happen? Because the Jews are hated. Why are the Jews hated? What is anti-Semitism? Why are we seeing anti-Semitism skyrocketing off the charts? There are things happening in the USA right now that looks like Germany in the 30s. Students, where the security actually locks the students in the library for their protection and ushers them out through a maintenance tunnel in America because they're Jewish. Wake up. That is just for that to be tolerated and allowed. All the trolls that are watching from afar take that as a message to take it up a notch. But what is the root? Jewish hatred of Jews is not the root of anti-Semitism. It's the byproduct of anti-Semitism. The root of anti-Semitism is rejection of God. If you have an observant Jewish community in your society where they're not going to work on this day, they're not going to eat that. They're going to do this way. They're going to wear these clothes. They're going to grow out their sideburns if they're commanded to. They're going to wear their funny little kippah. And they're going to do things that are so foreign and odd to us that they stick out like a spectacle in front of us and shove God right in our face to where we have to consider him, and people don't want to consider God. The Jewish community, whether they're just strictly Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox in their observance, or just keeping their community together through their observance, is a spectacle in the society around them that forces people to realize that they're glued together by their faith in God, by the history, by this Bible that seems to have the whole world wringing its hands over. But people don't want to consider God. I would encourage you, if you're having trouble connecting the dots on the point I'm making, get Dennis Prager's book, Why the Jews? Spoiler alert, I just gave you the punchline. But he articulates it out so that you can get a better handle on it. Rabbi Ken Spiro does another study that ends up with the same point. But the thing that we need to, we want to revisit is we started before, and you all agreed before I even asked you what you thought, that Hitler and Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran, it's the same spirit. Anybody object to that wild notion? Look at what we see. This Nazi salute that we see. Is that coincidental? You get Hamas with the green headbands on. Most of those are Hezbollah or Iran soldiers. These guys, they all have, now what is it? What's the bridge that connects Sunni and Shia? Hamas is Sunni and Hezbollah is Shia. What is the bridge? What's their common bond? Their common bond is their playbook, which is the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood was founded right after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, when a number of Islamic scholars got together and they tried to look at what they reverse engineered what had happened. They had allowed themselves to be, they thought, corrupted by Western influence, and so they decided to prevent that from happening. They were going to dial things up, and they were going to have religious laws. And the Muslim Brotherhood was kind of the keeper of that institution, of the keeper of what was going to be practiced. And whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah or ISIS, any of the Taliban, they are all exactly the same, and they're following the Muslim Brotherhood's handbook. The only thing that they vary in degree in is their level of patience. Some of them are willing to wait 100 years and take over an area demographically through birth. And some aren't willing to, they're not that patient. They want to take it over with the sword. But they all have the same, they all have the same end game. And so, but where does Hitler fit into this? This next line, this is the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. It's amazing to me that people have forgotten this. 18 years ago, this was a wild epiphany that people were making the connection of the Nazi influence on radical Islam. But this is the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. And he was essentially the Muslim Brotherhood, figurehead or chair for the Palestinian people. Great Britain appointed him to be kind of the liaison to the Arabs in then Palestine, and they didn't like the way that he was running things, where he went way out of the line and was stirring up conflict and evoking riots, and was not a fan of the Jewish immigration, and ended up, they cast him out. He went up to Lebanon, but and then through Italy with the Italian influence in Lebanon, and ended up being a pen pal, and then actually a buddy with Hitler. He ended up, this is an image from the Balkans, he ended up actually recruiting Muslim Nazi soldiers, and they are among the most feared in all of Hitler's armies. It's not a coincidence, no conspiracy theory here, don't need a tinfoil hat. These are chapters in history that people are turning a blind eye to. So all this is happening around us. All this has been happening for generations and decades. But we get back to what we almost saw would have been innovation diplomacy, where we almost saw Saudi Arabia grab the end of that olive branch and sit down and join the Abraham Accords with the UAE and Bahrain and others. And it starts with water technology, and it continues into all kinds of other technology, medicine and communication and environment and agriculture. But the bottom line, if you really want to just zero in and pull the sheets back and really look at it, they wanted to be on Israel's side because Iran was trying to move into the neighborhood, and they knew that their chances were highest if they had Israel on their side. That was one of the core pillars of the Abraham Accords. And Saudi Arabia was about to sit down, and there are people that would argue, there are scholars, there are pundits, there are journalists, there are professors, and that argue that was the catalytic, that was the trigger event, that everybody's tried to derail Saudi Arabia, because if that happened, it would have just almost been irretractable. Saudi Arabia started normalizing relations with Israel. But that wasn't the reason. That was just one significant contributing factor. But this is all inevitable because it is the hatred of the Jews. If it wasn't this, it would be something else. This is the present link in an endless chain of attacks in the past and planned attacks in the future. And our predecessors, for the most part, in America, we have history and chapters of history with anti-Semitism. We've seen what our counterparts in Europe and North Africa and the Middle East, some people some people rose to be something that we would long to emulate, whether it's Casper ten Boom, or whether we hear the reports of we love the story about Anne Frank, but it wasn't Anne Frank. It was the family that hid Anne Frank. It was the family that answered the door at 1 a.m, knowing that if they get caught, everybody in the house is going to get killed. But they open the door anyways, and they take them in, and they figure out how to hide them. One of the questions that I think we all would ask, but nobody would raise a hand during Q&A, and I shared this last night. I've made this a fixed part of this message until I am released to not do so. When this all went down on October 7th, on October 8th, I started calling all my Jewish friends, rabbis and leaders, and I made myself a concise script. I didn't have time to do the pleasantries. You don't call up after they just learned that their nation was attempted to be annihilated and go, hey, how you doing? I just tried to get right to the point as respectfully as I could. I assumed that I was just going to get lost in a pile of calls that they were getting, checking in on them, asking how they were doing. And I learned more often than not that nobody else had called. And all I said was, I just want you to know that we are outraged over what's happened. We're heartbroken. And if there's anything that we can do to stand in solidarity, just let us know. And I called one rabbi not far from my house, and she recognized my voice. And before I even got my sentence out, she was crying. And she said, we're having a healing service on Shabbat. We'd love it if you could come. We're just trying to figure out how to cope with this. And so I rounded up a few Christians, and we thought, arrogantly, I guess, that we were going to minister to them. Remember, just a few days prior, they just learned that toddlers had been beheaded. And this is how she starts this prayer service, by quoting Golda Meir. She's attributed with saying that we can forgive the Arabs for killing our children, but we can never forgive the Arabs for forcing us to kill their children. Try to grasp the moral clarity and the self-sacrifice in that. And this is the prayer that they led us in. We as a people, our children, our friends, have been called to do the unthinkable. In the name of freedom and security, for the sake of the undying dream of peace, with hearts on the edge of breaking, our people have been called to kill and to be killed. Through the gruesome harshness of battle, despite the soul-crushing savagery of war, in the face of barbarism of almost unimaginable proportion, help us, Spirit of God, to soften our hearts, to safeguard our souls, to hold tight to our humanity and compassion, just as you reminded us when we crossed the sea toward freedom that our enemies remain your children. Remind us today and every day that death and devastation must never feed our souls, must always pain us to our very core. May we remember to cry for all victims of terror and hate in our land of Israel, in Gaza, and wherever they suffer and fall. May we remember that we do not seek vengeance and we do not revel in killing, but rather we grieve that we are called to destroy in order to create. I had people pull me aside last night at Pastor Canary's church and ask for a copy of that because they wanted to adopt that into their prayers. I don't know that I have, I don't know that if somebody killed one of my kids, I don't know if I would have that compassion. I'm just being honest. I don't know how I would not have an axe to grind. But so just be very, very careful. One, this is not about an occupation, and they're not occupying somebody else's land. But the other soundbite that you're going to hear now it's not about the occupation. Now it's about disproportionate retaliation. They only killed 1,400, and now we're up to 10,000. And so they're looking at it as though it's some kind of a scoreboard. And let me just say as respectfully as I can, do a little bit of homework. Find reputable sources. CUFI is absolutely impeccable in the news sources that we provide. Sign up for our weekly update or our daily update, and you will get sources. We've only had to do one retraction, and it was because we released what the IDF released, and they got it wrong, and so we retracted it after they retracted it. And that was the report that there were paragliders coming in from southern Lebanon into the Golan Heights. And that was mistaken. They retracted it, and we retracted it. But we only went with it because they provided the source. So if that's our mistake, that's a pretty good batting average. So it is tirelessly, scrupulously vetted. But get your facts and information, because as you do, you're going to realize that every one of those victims, whether it's 10,000 and continues to grow, every one of those victims, their blood is on the hands of Hamas. They have prevented them from, Israel did everything humanly possible to warn them to get out. Everything from dropping leaflets to radio broadcasts to texting. It's a little scary, big brothery when they have the text, when they have the numbers of virtually everybody in there to text them warnings to be able to, so that they know to get out. And those that wanted to get out couldn't get out because Hamas wouldn't let them get out. When the UN tried to bring in buses to evacuate them, they were shot at. Going door to door, taking away people's car keys, blocking the roads. Half of the challenge that the IDF has in doing the evacuation is unblocking the roads that Hamas has blocked so that the people can evacuate and go south. So you're going to hear horrific reports about unimaginable casualties, but their blood is on the hands of Hamas, not on Israel. So make sure that you keep things, it is not disproportionate because it's not a scoreboard. Why is Israel going in to destroy Hamas? Is it a vengeance act to get even for what they did, for what happened? No. They're not doing it because of what happened. They're doing it so it never happens again. They are not going to avenge the death of the 1,400. They're going in to prevent the deaths of their kids and grandkids. And they're going to do what should have been done a long time ago. And believe me, when they do, it's going to look horrible on the news. And your friends are going to be amazed that you're able to stand with that apartheid state of Israel, that inhumane state of Israel, as they're going to say. So you need to know your facts, because the whole process of delegitimizing and demonizing Israel, which is the whole process of why Jews are hated and why they're ostracized. I could show you clip after clip after clip of campuses of people that are so passionate and knowledge and confident of the ignorance and the lies that that they're regurgitating because they were fed to them by somebody that they trust, that they're spitting while they're screaming, that the Jews are literally saying that they're not even human. We talked about ODD, but you also need to know about the 3 Ds. And it's the process. How do you take a group that's in your community and get to the point where genocide is on the table? It starts with delegitimizing them. Oh, you know what? The Jews, they take shortcuts. They run everything. That's why they're so well up. They run the banks. And the media, they control the way that everyone thinks, because they control the media, everything from movies to the news. You delegitimize them to where they don't deserve what they've got because they take shortcuts. And then pretty soon, it goes from delegitimizing to demonizing, because it's not that they don't deserve what they've got. They're responsible because you don't have and I don't have what we deserve. And then once you get there, then you enter in Darwinism. The scientific elite, that we're the little nub of the horn down there. Literally, this is the tinfoil hat nonsense that these people teach their kids. So you go from delegitimizing to demonizing to dehumanizing, to where they're nothing more than an animal. And when you can convince somebody that somebody is not even human, then genocide is just around the corner. And that's what these people have been taught. You just do a little homework and you're going to run into it. We're going to ask you, if you're not already a member, I'm going to ask you right now to pull out the membership sign-up card. If you don't receive our emails, you should have gotten them about this event. So we probably don't have your email, even if you filled out a card. If you didn't get an email invite to come here, then we don't have you in our system. So fill out another one. It's right in here. And just fill it out as legibly as you can. Everybody likes to fill out their contact cards or write their email like they're a physician writing out a prescription. And though we're nearly 11 million members, we'd probably be around 13 million members if we could have read everybody's email. So just make it as legible as you can. Have it in hand. And I'm just going to ask Pastor Joey just to show you a quick overview video. We've still got 35 minutes to go, so we're in good shape.
That have helped Israel and the Jewish people in such ways of magnitude.
That was the former ambassador to Israel, David Friedman. And if he was here tonight, he would tell you that this ministry played a catalytic role in getting the embassy moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I'm not boasting, and as I've been told, if it's the truth, you're not bragging. But if he was here, he would confirm that this ministry, Pastor Hagee in particular, played a catalytic role in getting that done. And for the sake of time, I won't go into it. This slide, if you can if we can keep those slides up there, that would be great. This QR code, right now, I'm going to ask you to fill out that card as legibly as you can. If you prefer, if you don't trust your handwriting, you can take advantage of one of the rare opportunities where you're asked to turn your phone on in church, and you can take a picture. Just aim your camera lens at that QR code, and that'll take you right to the page where you can sign in so that you don't have to worry about filling out the card. This next slide, this is our Israel course. Right now, I'm asking you to become members of CUFI, or I'm thanking you that you already are members, but now I'm asking you to take a look and consider the Israel course, whether the church might consider it as a small group or you just want to put it on your nightstand. Every chapter is like a standalone learning experience that you can do in just a few minutes. Every chapter has 3 learning objectives that you begin with and that you're gonna have when you're done with that chapter. The whole book, it culminates with chapter 20, the last chapter, and the learning objectives of chapter 20 are really the exclamation mark for the whole book and really cornerstones in the core values of this ministry and our leaders, and I believe of what they should be for Christian Zionists or Christians that consider them lovers of Israel. And that is, one, being pro-Israel is never synonymous with being anti-Arab or anti-Muslim. God loves all of his kids. And there are people that just can't reconcile, how do I love them without hating them? And until you can figure that out, not a chair at this table. I'm sorry to say that so curtly, but you need to figure that out. The worst enemies that the Arabs in Gaza have ever had are their own leaders that have kept the proverbial boot on their throat to demonize Israel in the eyes of the international community, that use their own people as a festering wound to evoke sympathy from the international community and blame Israel for their plight and condition. But it's very, very important for us to realize being pro-Israel is not the same. It doesn't mean that you're anti-Arab. Unfortunately, most of the camp that's pro-Arab is anti-Israel, but that's not our problem. It's our problem, but it's not our fault. The other learning objective is, if you really want to be a Christian Zionist, it begins with Matthew 5:9. Blessed are the peacekeepers, for they shall be called the children of God. And just for the sake of clarity, because if you Google us, if you Google our ministry, there are plenty of people that hate. When you are a pastor like Pastor Hagee that has the following of people that are amazing Bible scholars in their own right and want to sit at his feet because he brings things to a whole new dimension, or if you're a ministry like this where God clearly has found it good in his sight and has used it to do things as significant as moving the embassy, it evokes jealousy out of people. And there's some criticism. And a lot of people think because we do educational, informational solidarity events and we don't do a fire and brimstone altar call at the end of them, that because we're by design and non-conversionary. We're by design, without exception, non-conversionary to the Jewish people. Pastor David is one of our leaders from early on. And if you come to this church on a Sunday morning, you're going to get no apologies, straight up, 180 horsepower altar call. We don't make a secret about it. We don't make an apology for it. We believe Jesus Christ is the Messiah. But we don't hold our Jewish friends hostage and demand that they agree with that before we're going to commit to stand with them. And that's what separates us from a lot of other, Christian organizations. And so they know that, and I'll tell my friends, I don't make a secret about it. I think one of your guys was the Messiah, and we'll talk about that again when you bring it up, and we were standing on that. Some of you that have been to Israel, you know that road. It's under a covering. It's 2,000 years old, and it's the original stones, and it dead ends into a wall. Anybody nodding their head up and down because they know what I'm talking about? And there's a mural there that looks like it's a time that's 2,000 years ago, and it creates the optical illusion that the road keeps going. And there's a city scene there, and there's a Jesus-esque man with a lamb over his shoulders, and it looks like he's probably going home for Passover. Well, I was on a trip with pastors from Las Vegas, and we actually ended up bringing 3 rabbis with us from the Jewish community. They said, "Can we go?" "Nope, can't go. This is for pastors. We'll pay our own way." "Sorry, we're going to be doing things that you're not going to get. You're not going to appreciate it. We'll pay our own way, and we'll sponsor this out-of-the-world Shabbat dinner so that all the pastors can learn about Shabbat." "Okay, you can come." And so we're standing on this road and looking at this mural, and one of my rabbi friends is standing right next to me, great big bear of a guy, and he lovingly slaps me on the shoulder, and he goes, "What is it with you Christians and lambs?" And I said the best that I could. I said, "Well, we believe that you guys were so busy watching for the Lion of Judah that when he came as the Lamb of God, you totally missed him." And he goes, "You know what? Yeah, we weren't expecting a peace-loving hippie to come along. We were looking for a military general that was going to come and take over." And we just have to realize, and I believe that that's exactly what happened. That they were looking for that deliverer, and a deliverer came with a different mission that time, but he'll be coming as a Lion of Judah next time. And so, but I ask you to look at this, consider going to the summit. You just saw a glimpse of it on the video. One of the things that's really important to do is to appreciate that this year we will always be going to D.C. and advocating for continued aid to Israel. But this year, the Iron Dome is more important than other. The Iron Dome is a entirely 100% defense system. It uses 3 pieces of U.S. military technology that Israel closed the garage door and tinkered with and blended them together to do things that we didn't think it could do. And now we're benefiting from it, from the technology, where they can detect a projectile coming in a nanosecond, determine if it's going to land harmlessly in a field or near a school or populated area. And then in that fraction of a second, it says, okay, field, let it go. School or populated area, they send 2 missiles up that are guided and has the intelligence to intercept them and take them out of the sky. And they're accurate and successful 85 to 90% of the time. But when you have 130,000 rockets like Hezbollah on the Lebanon border, Iron Dome isn't going to be a match for it. They're going to use this to the degree that they can, and there are already people in Congress that are going to start playing footsie with the replenishment of the munitions by tying pork barrel projects on it and trying to get their way for political capital. And you know what happens? Because we've done that once before. We've held them back once before to just remind them that we're boss. And what does that mean? That means that they have to go and hit the launch site where there are guaranteed to be civilian casualties. So by the absurdity and the hypocrisy that's involved in trying to deny this sophisticated defense system. This next slide, did we have the image of the DC summit? Of the DC march, Joey? Did we already have that? So so if we could do that again. This is coming up Tuesday. So put this in your prayers. If by chance, if you just had a windfall or you were figuring out what to, you had this vacation days and dollars that you just didn't know what to do with, this Tuesday we're going to be joining tens of thousands of Jews and Christians just to send a message that we want this nation to stand fast. We appreciate those that have, and we want them to be unwavering in that. So, but I just want to thank you for being here tonight, for coming out, especially all the pastors that are here from different churches. It's very inspiring and encouraging to see it when we can all get along, and if we, Christians united for Israel. Christian is of a caliber, it kind of, whatever those other things are that we can allow to kind of separate us, they're pretty petty when you compare them to the importance of Israel. And so thank you for all being here. And again, if you just give these to the folks at the door when you leave, but before you do, we can shift gears to Q&A or I'm gonna. So I can just repeat the question too. But if anybody has any questions or yes, sir. Six-Day War. So the remark was that he is noticing, as we all are that are paying attention, there's a generational gap. There's a divide. There's a couple of different columns. So you've got folks that are pretty much those that are over 40 that see the moral clarity. They see they know the history, and so they're not so prone to falling for the false narratives that we're all being spoon-fed. About how noble the leaders of Hamas are, and that they're just, that they're very, very, that they're underdogs. Everybody loves, liberation theology, liberation Christian theology is based on the whole underdog theory. Jesus came for the underdog. Jesus was an underdog. If you want to be like Jesus, you got to be for the underdog. But it leaves out that, he that is set free is free indeed. It demands that you have a perpetual oppressor. You have a perpetual, so that the underdog victim is your perpetual identity. And so that is something that's been hung on the Palestinian people, and it's been hung on a lot of Christians that subscribe to liberation, to this Marxist version of liberation theology. Liberation theology in its roots had a really noble, beginnings with the exit, the African slaveries identifying with Israel's exodus out of Egypt, and that give 2 thumbs up for Hamas. They are essentially the American-appointed spokesperson. They're the poster boys and girls for Hamas in the United States. And if you want to say that beheading toddlers and raping women, cutting a fetus from its mother's womb is a form of resistance, do you know what that is? That's an expression of moral bankruptcy. So anyone that's giving any kind of support to those groups that are trying to echo, if anything, they should be trying to get the Gazans evacuated to the south so they can get out of harm's way, if they really care. But the reality is anybody that's giving any kind of moral support or tangible support to these groups that think that Hamas are doing the right thing, they are either idiots in their ignorance, or they are entirely morally bankrupt. So, and that's the gap. And there are people that they tend to be. If you look at the divide, it's not even 50-50. It's below 50 that are for, and over 50% that are support. It is below, under 50% that are for Israel, and over 50% that are for, what they say, the Palestinian people. But Hamas is the poster child. And getting back to our I'll get to you in 1 second. Getting back to our 3 characters for the media story: the villain, the victim, and the hero. The media is right now in the spot where they have to cast Hamas as the hero.
So, my question is, how do you respond to those who say that when you bring up the point of raping women, beheading children, all the atrocities that you're mentioning, that they're saying that that's not true, it's fake news, that a good Muslim would never do such a thing because that's against their religious beliefs as peace-loving people. So they're saying that's all made up, that Israel's making that up. How do you even respond to that kind of thinking?
Well, the evidence that they did do those things is because they filmed it as they did it.
Yeah.
They filmed it for their own posterity. I don't know why they would film it. I don't know if there was an incentive program that was, or if they were trying to use it to bolster their standing among their peers. I don't know why they would film doing those things, but the fact that they did those things, they're confirming it forensically through the crime scenes, through the scenes of what take place. But for the most part, the people that did it were filming it and posting it on social media platforms. It's not a hearsay rumor that people are verbally trying to start this this conspiracy falsehood. These are things that these people that perpetrated these horrific acts, they were proud of it. They wanted to get credit for it. They wanted to, I don't know if they thought that was going to be their ticket to paradise or what was their motivating factor, but they documented it so that there would be no question about doing it. The same thing with the Holocaust. It's exactly why Eisenhower, as soon as he saw the camps, he said, go get a camera and record this, because there's going to be a time in the future when some SOB, as he said, is going to say this never happened.
Today I heard, I didn't get a chance to check myself, but I had heard that the American naval shot into Iran. Is that correct, and what is that?
I did not hear that. I did not hear that. I'm not going to speculate because I don't know anything about that report.
I was going to ask if you know anything about Israel's laser defense system. And so they supposedly have something, but it's very limited because it's large and hard to move.
No, I don't. I mean, again, there are. I think it's safe to say that when you're in a theater of war and the world is as tense as it is, that countries are gonna keep their cards close to their vest about what their capabilities are. They're not going to broadcast it. The element of surprise is an invaluable ingredient, and so there may be speculation. We all remember, or some of us that are old enough to remember, Ronald Reagan talking about our laser system that we were deploying on satellites that was a catalytic ingredient to getting the Soviet Union to collapse and trying to financially keep up with a program that never existed. Any other questions? All right. Well, we very much appreciate you all coming out tonight, and I pray traveling mercies on all of you. I will encourage you, don't take anything, don't repeat. You know, if you made a note of something that I said, then use that as the end of the thread. Go home and start with our own media sources through CUFI, and just start pulling on that to equip yourself. When you're defending Israel here in the United States, it's not like you're on the front lines of Gaza or Lebanon or Syria. When you're over here, chances you're probably never going to be defending Israel to a point, God forbid, where our life is endangered or even our property is endangered. You know, if you put a big, Star David bumper sticker on your car, you might get keyed these days with the crazy people that are out there. But for the most part, our choice to stand on the front lines and defend Israel, we're combating lies. So if you're going to be, standing up and signing up to help defend Israel when you know that the battle is going to be confronting lies, then truth is your weapon and facts are your ammunition. And so we need you to equip and arm yourself with knowledge. The Israel course is a great way to start biblically, historically, geopolitically. But look at the daily updates and the sources so that when people make a claim, you're up to date and you're able to refute it and to correct them. And do it in a way where you're not making them a fool, but where you are encouraging them with what God has done to and through Israel to be the blessing to the nations that she is. So we are in the hour where evil's being called good and dark is being called light, and remember, that those passages in Isaiah 41 through 45, that we are to be the witnesses. That is not unlike, I think it's 2 Peter 3:15, where people see a hope reflected in us when we don't know that they're watching us. And so on that note, I really am done, and I'm going to hand it back to my friend, Pastor Dave.
Thank you, Randy, so much. Something that came to my mind earlier when you were talking about Psalm 122, about our prayer time, and let me see, it's 1 Peter chapter 3 and chapter 4 and verse 7. And this has been a keynote verse because we've started a series on house of prayer. Amen? And we are a house of prayer. And it just goes right along with verse 7. It says, "But the end of all things is at hand. Therefore, be serious and watchful in your prayers." And we all agree the end of all things is at hand. And imagining that 2,000 years ago this was said, where are we at now? We're really at the end times. Amen? It's customary as a church and ministry that we receive tithes and offerings and things like that. And I have something planned already from our ministry to sow into Christians United for Israel. So what I'm going to do is just invite you to also, if you want to, so you can just add to what we're going to be given. That would be a great blessing. I'm not going to pass the buckets or anything like that, but I just want to remind you that we have the box, the holy anointed box on the back wall, right? And I see some of you already have an envelope and look like you're already ready to give. God bless you. There's offering envelopes in front of you. If there's well, you don't have a row in front of you, but behind you, and you're welcome to help yourself to that. There's also offering envelopes there by the box there. And we pray for Israel. We pray for the peace of Jerusalem tonight in agreement, Father God. And we thank you, Lord, for wisdom with the leadership in the land there, and the military leadership, the strategists, and all those, Lord. And we just pray for your wisdom and guidance for them, also for our leaders in our nation. You said, first of all, pray for those who are in authority. Pray for presidents, leaders, kings, and so on. And so we do. We just pray, Lord, for wisdom and guidance in our leadership, in our nation, where Israel is concerned. And we give you praise, honor, and glory for it in the name of Jesus. And everybody who agreed with that prayer said, amen and amen. You don't have to run off. Just stay around fellowship as much as you like. And again, thank you for coming. God bless our pastors for being with us.